Greetings, my name is Cameron Miller, and this is Trinity Place in Geneva, New York, and this is a sermon or a reflection on the readings for the 6th Sunday of Pentecost, which also happens to be the 4th of July, so happy 4th of July. I wonder if you have ever considered how difficult it might be to play basketball as the teenage son or daughter of Michael Jordan or LeBron James. The same could be true also with being Jesus' brothers or sisters, or even his mother. We can get to the discomfort of being Jesus by coming through the back door of his family. Now, Jesus in this story is known as the son of Mary. No man in those days was known as the son of his mother, unless his father was unknown. To have Jesus referenced as the son of Mary, as in, isn't that Mary's son, is a reminder of a scandalous history that just won't die in a small town. Likewise, to be Jesus' brothers, as in James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon, is to be associated with whatever your brother does. Guilt by association. Isn't that your crazy brother, James? Isn't that your crazy brother, James? Must run in the family. That kind of thing. Well, just a few weeks ago, we heard the story in Mark about the painful hemorrhage in family bonds when Jesus was at his own house in Nazareth, and it was crowded with people who would all come there to try to get healed of their woundedness. And if you remember that story, from way back in the back of the alley, because they couldn't get through, Mary and her adult children appear. Now the narrator, Mark, tells us they came to take Jesus home. They came to take him home because they thought he was possessed. Literally, they said he was beside himself, or, as we would say today, crazy. Someone yells, "Hey, Jesus, your mother and your brothers and your sisters are here." Well, knowing what's up, Jesus says, perhaps scowling in the direction of his blood relatives, "Who are my mother and my brother and my sisters? These here," pointing to the scab and pus oozing around him. "These here are my mother and brothers and sisters." So, long before Jesus was rejected by his neighbors at the old synagogue at home, Jesus had to contend with the painful distance between a prophet and his or her family and friends. But I suspect that all of us can identify with that personally on some level. That painfulness of being Mary, that it's painful to be Mary and to be his siblings as well. My mother always used to tell me, and I think my siblings, that our actions didn't just reflect on us individually, but also on the whole family. She probably said that more to me than to my siblings now that I'm thinking about it. But Jesus' family became suspect because Jesus was suspect. Jesus' notoriety served to keep the scandal of his birth fresh and dogging his mother all those years later. His shame was their shame. But while his family is ashamed, apparently Jesus is not. Jesus had a vision that they did not see. He had a knowledge that they did not know. He had a purpose they did not share. And so goes the prophet. That reading from Buechner dispels the myth that the prophet is one who sees the future or predicts the future. In the biblical tradition, a prophet is not a fortune teller or even a predictor of future events. A prophet is the voice of God. The prophet is the very lips of God, the mind of God uttered upon the notes of an ordinary human voice. Now, you may not believe in such a thing, but just imagine, if you will, if it were true, how terrible, how terrifying it would be to be a prophet. No one in their right mind who has ever even has an inkling of what it would mean would want to be a prophet. Now, when I was younger, and even more dense and ridiculous than I am now, I wanted to be a prophet. Like many liberals in the church, I like to think of myself back in those days as prophetic when I acted as surly and angry critic of the church and other institutions. But what liberals often think of as prophetic is no more than adolescent rebellion or passive-aggressive bitterness. Meanwhile, the prophets we do have, the actual, for-real prophets, they get romanticized beyond the point of recognition. They get domesticated and easy for us to take in rather than what they are, hard to swallow, painful to listen to, maybe even unpleasant to be around. Take, for example, Martin Luther King Jr. He was a very ordinary minister who actually wanted to be an academic, not a prophet. He's a mythic hero now, of course, but in retrospect. At the time of the Civil Rights Movement, most whites and millions of blacks took offense at him, and they felt threatened by the activities to which he gave his voice. His popularity, even among his own inner circle, ebbed and flowed, and at one point Dr. King almost single-handedly took on the entire leadership of the Civil Rights Movement by deciding to engage in public criticism and public advocacy against the Vietnam War because he could see that it was a racist war. He insisted that Vietnam was a platform from which to confront racism, and that action got him in trouble with almost everyone, friend, foe, or ally. Like all prophets, he was out of step with his own colleagues, as in a step or two ahead. Prophets are rarely wild-eyed zealots, marching off to glory like a moth burning itself into the heat of a flame. John Brown, for example. Rather, prophets tend to be more like Moses, Jeremiah, Amos, Micah, Ezekiel, Jesus, who were either well-ensconced members of the establishment when they began their prophetic ministry, or they were innocent bystanders who were abruptly selected for the job and immediately retired into obscurity afterwards, if indeed they made it out alive. Truly, being a prophet is not a job anyone who understands it would desire or seek. The position has a fairly specific job description, in case any of us are interested in applying. You see, the prophet holds up the distance between what we say we believe and what we actually do. Let me repeat that in case you want to apply for this job. The prophet holds up the distance between what we say we believe and how we actually live. In deference to the gospel story we just heard, the prophet is actually more likely to be an influential voice among those with whom he or she lives and works and plays, rather than among strangers. I mean, think about it. Who has more influence on us than our other family members and friends? Certainly, the home crowd is more persuasive and powerful than a ranting television preacher or even a ranting Trinity Place preacher. Surely the opinions of family and friends over time have far more clout with us than unknown social critics who yak at us from social media and television. It's parents and children and spouses and partners and co-workers and members of the faith community even, who can best hold up to us the distance between what we say and what we do. Often it only takes one person to stick their neck out and to refuse to confirm ignorant bigotry, for instance, and to staunch the easy flow of such things among a group of family or friends. Or if not staunch the flow, raise a conversation that can demonstrate that the bigoted or ignorant remarks that have been made are not universally held. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not Pollyanna. When we stand up to be that first little voice, like Ezekiel says, we may feel as if we are surrounded by briars and thorns and scorpions, but eventually truth has a way of leveling ugliness and coming back around to shine upon the holder of the truth. It's certainly not a pleasant task, but how much more life-giving is it to be the lips of God than the brackish decay of silence in the face of bigotry or ignorance or even lies. Being prophetic is not fun, and it's not even very rewarding, but the alternative is to rot in the furrows of those whose intent is not love and whose seed is not truth. Being prophetic does not require fame or public histrionics or anything terribly heroic. All it requires, really, is to begin saying what we already know to be true and give a voice to a vision we already know to be possible. Now, in case you have a nagging and irrational interest in being prophetic, here's an even more specific job description for the position of prophet. First, the prophet identifies and names the assumptions and idols we have taken for granted and live with daily. The prophet names, acknowledges, and names the idols we live with daily. Secondly, the prophet evokes a vision of an alternative reality. If not these things, then what? And third, the prophet holds up to the community and encourages it to rehearse whatever that alternative vision is. If not this, then this, and let's practice this. While you and I may not each individually be called upon to prophetic ministry, the church and the body of Christ is a prophetic ministry. That is what we are. We cannot be the church unless we are a prophetic community. It's our nature. And if we refuse the task, then we are not who we were created to be. It really is just that simple and just that important. As the body of Christ, we are called upon to name out loud in front of the city or the neighborhood or anyone who might listen the false idols that get worshipped among us. You know, things like consumerism, nationalism, patriotism to an extreme degree, denominationalism, the immoderate pursuit of happiness, success, wealth, and power. It's not a small or secret list. I think we know it well. After naming our idols, we're called upon to share our vision of an alternative way to live. For some, that means learning to walk, learning a way to talk about our faith with people who we love and know well, even people who we simply work with or see on a regular basis. Because it's really difficult to be the lips of God if we are unable to evoke the vision of an alternative reality or possibility. Finally, the prophetic community, as a prophetic community, we rehearse that vision of an alternative way to live. We rehearse it personally in our homes. We rehearse it in our neighborhoods and jobs, and we rehearse it in the church when we gather for worship and fun and whatever else we do together. We're like a labor and delivery coach or doula who assists in the birthing process but cannot make it happen. Rather, we attend God who brings forth new life. Here's the truth. We must know and remind each other of it often. If we do not name our idols, if we do not evoke a vision, if we do not rehearse the alternative, then we cannot be the body of Christ. We are called to be a prophetic community in the image of the prophet Jesus, a prophet who walked in the shoes of the prophets before him, and who blesses all the prophets, including us, who follow in his footsteps. This is our call, yours and mine and Trinity's, or whatever faith community you might participate in. It is to be a prophetic community in the image of Jesus. And to those who get upset with us, and who call us un-American or un-Christian or just rude and annoying, we can remind them of what Frederick Buechner wrote. A prophet's quarrel with the world is deep down a lover's quarrel. If they didn't love the world, they probably wouldn't bother. They'd just let it go. Well, we love the world. We love the community. Let's not let it go. Peace be with you.